Hayao Miyazaki was born on January 5, 1941, in Tokyo, Japan. His father ran a business that manufactured plane parts, and while Miyazaki did not end up joining the family business when he grew up, the love of planes, flying, and the freedom that comes with it have become centerpieces of Miyazaki's films. Miyazaki's work in the film and television industry began in 1963 when he became employed in an entry-level animation position at Toei Animation, a name that should be very familiar to fans of Japanese animation. Among those he met when working at Toei were a man who would become a lifelong friend and collaborator of Miyazaki, named Takahata Isao, and a woman named Ota Akeme, who would later go on to become his wife. Following their time at Toei, Miyazaki and Isao worked for various animation studios in Japan. Miyazaki's directorial debut was for a television series adaptation of a popular manga by the name of Lupin III. Following Miyazaki's success in adapting the Lupin III manga, Miyazaki was entrusted to direct a feature film also based on Lupin III, which was his first feature film, Lupin III: The Castle of Cagliostro. Now, I am extremely biased towards loving this movie. I first heard about Lupin III in 2020 through trying to explore Hayao Miyazaki's works and completely fell in love with Lupin III's insane cast of characters. The Castle of Cagliostro takes a far lighter tone than Miyazaki's previous works on Lupin, a shift that I definitely prefer. I've seen the whole spectrum of Lupin media, and I prefer Miyazaki's hopeful image of Lupin. He really brings the gentleman out of the gentleman thief, and I am definitely not alone in loving this movie. Hayao Miyazaki's exciting adventure story has become insanely influential in ways you would never guess. The Castle of Cagliostro is even said to have inspired one of the most famous movie series of all time, Indiana Jones. Now, to be honest, I thought that this was an easily citable claim. I thought that there was an interview out there where Steven Spielberg himself says that he saw Castle of Cagliostro at some film festival or wherever and was inspired by the action scenes and put some of that inspiration into Indiana Jones. However, when researching this, all that I could sort of find was that it's just a well-established rumor, but it's a well-established rumor that I believe in my heart. And even outside of Western media, Lupin III has influenced iconic anime such as Cowboy Bebop and even, albeit very tangentially, Neon Genesis Evangelion. Moving on from Lupin, Takahata and Miyazaki went on to launch the now famous Studio Ghibli in 1985, and the following year they would release Castle in the Sky. Castle in the Sky was one of the first movies from Studio Ghibli I watched, and it still holds up in my heart. This is where we first see Miyazaki's love of flying in his films. The main character, Pazu's father, flew aircraft, and of course the whole crux of the movie is the titular Castle in the Sky, known as Laputa in the film. In the English dub of this film, the most outstanding performance is by far Mark Hamill's portrayal of the villain. As well as the soft blues that glow in this movie are a beautiful visual theme that entrances you throughout the film. This film also introduces what would soon be common in Miyazaki's films, which is strong and complex female characters and protagonists. This is a long-praised feature of Miyazaki's work, as, especially in Japan, female protagonists, especially young girls, are very rarely seen. Here is where I must come clean, as a somewhat fake Studio Ghibli fan. There are several Ghibli films I haven't seen, the most embarrassing of which being My Neighbor Totoro, which, I know, it's pretty much Studio Ghibli's flagship movie that is one of the most recognizable Studio Ghibli characters in it, and I promise I'm planning on watching it at some point, but I simply just haven't yet. Other films I can't give comment on are Grave of the Fireflies, which I've been putting off watching because I know it will completely emotionally destroy me, Kiki's Delivery Service, and Porco Rosso. And while I haven't seen these films, I know for a fact that flying and planes are huge parts of their stories. The next Ghibli film to come out that I have seen is Princess Mononoke, which came out in 1997. Princess Mononoke threw me for a loop when I first saw it, because while I know not every Ghibli movie is sunshine and rainbows, I thought the violence in Princess Mononoke was supposed to be all fantastical. Needless to say, I was very wrong. and while I was not in the headspace to watch it initially, when I did watch it, I was blown away. Princess Mononoke is a powerful film that at its core is about violence. The violence humans enact on each other, and the violence humans enact on the environment. The imagery of the various spirits of the forest in this movie has inspired many animated films and shows since. Next is arguably the best Studio Ghibli film, 2001's Spirited Away. While Spirited Away is definitely up there for me, I can't quite say it's my favorite. It is an iconic and fantastic movie that yet again has become incredibly influential with its world design and especially the character design of No-Face. This is also the only Ghibli film that has won an Academy Award. However, it may be the only one to win for more nefarious reasons. On the one hand, we have consistently seen the Academy's disdain towards animated films, often not giving their stories the credit they deserve. And on the other, an important part of Miyazaki's work are his politics. There is simply no way around it. It is instilled in every film he makes, and during the Oscar season, when Spirited Away became eligible and nominated for an Oscar, the United States had gone to war in Iraq. A decision Miyazaki vehemently deposed. As a respectful protest, Miyazaki chose not to appear at the awards, and the nonsensical violence of the war Miyazaki opposed would become a theme in his next film, Howl's Moving Castle. This is by far my favorite Studio Ghibli movie. I've seen it countless times, as well as read the book it's based on, and I even have the official art book for the film. The film's main conflict is a war between two kingdoms that is founded upon impatient finger-pointing over a missing prince. The fiery devastation and corruption of this war is a fitting parallel to the events it's loosely based on. There are several differences between the book and movies that I don't have a ton of time to get into, but I recommend you check out both. They are different experiences for sure, and the most major difference is Howl's characterization, but I love both my Howls unconditionally. Speaking of Howl, the English cast of this movie is incredibly stacked. Howl himself is played by Christian Bale of all people, and he does an amazing job. And then we've also got Gene Simmons, Lauren Bacall, Jenna Malone, Josh Hutcherson, and Billy Crystal, who is also hysterically as Calcifer. Personally, this is also easily the most visually impactful movie for me. From the eclectic nature of Howl's bedroom, to the beautiful field of flowers Howl takes Sophie to the scene of Howl catching a falling star, to the insanely trippy magic/mind battle Howl has with Madame Solomon, is breathtaking. And at the end of the day, I'm a sucker for a cute romance. Howl's Moving Castle also once again hits us back with flight and flying imagery, symbolizing both freedom, but also more negatively, escapism. When Howl's Castle does the whole, flying thing, it's a full circle moment of Howl finally being able to be free himself, fly on his own terms instead of running from his perceived duty as he has been the whole movie. There are other Ghibli movies I have seen, and even more that I haven't. We simply don't have time to go over them all. But all this is to say that Hayao Miyazaki and the various projects he has worked on have irrevocably changed the way I view art, and even the way I view life. I don't want to go all zealous and say that Miyazaki is the second coming because, well, let's face it, he's human, and all humans have their missteps and flaws, and Miyazaki is no different. And while I love his films and he's a huge inspiration, it's important to not fully put everyone on a pedestal, especially your idols. With that being said, however, it is undeniable the impact Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki has had on media and the world at large. The number of connections and references to the films and worlds he's built that is seen in other media is uncountable at this point, and I would like to recognize that. However, in 2014, Miyazaki announced his retirement. The Wind Rises, which premiered in 2013, was to be the last feature film he was going to direct. And while that movie was widely praised for its touching story and was even nominated for an Oscar, it seems the world would have to say goodbye to Miyazaki's mind. Well, except Miyazaki kind of pulled a fast one on everyone, and in 2016 announced he was coming back to direct another movie, a long-form adaptation of a short film he had previously produced. However, now today, this movie is yet to come out, and it's no wonder why. In 2020, COVID completely rampaged media companies, especially animation studios such as Studio Ghibli. As of now, I believe it's still unknown when Studio Ghibli will return with another film, but